Holy City Center Radio. It is episode 346, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, February 28th, 2025. Just like that, February is over. Today is the last day. I know it's the shortest month, but, it still went by a little quicker than I expected, especially after January seemed to last about 4 months in total. So, all of a sudden things picked up. Sorry I wasn't with you on Wednesday. My birthday was Tuesday, which is when I would normally record. And sadly, I know it wasn't a bug, but just my stomach was kind of bothering me, and that kind of carried over into Wednesday as well. I just wasn't really feeling great, and I had lots of other work to do. So I said, you know what? It's my birthday. I'm not feeling great. Let's just not do this podcast. So I apologize. And yeah, a little bit of a bummer because I was hoping to do something, maybe try a new restaurant, for my birthday. But, unable to do that. No big deal. I can do those things any other day. Yes, that's why there was no show earlier this week. And, despite not feeling great, birthday was fine. As I said, no plans, didn't do anything. But, received, some nice messages from friends and acquaintances, whether on social media, text messages, calls, and of course my family as well, reaching out to me, of course, and also giving me presents, which is always great. So it was nice to have those messages and things. So thanks to everyone who sent them or however, whether you texted, left a message on my personal Facebook or, Quentin Washington of Quentin's Close-Ups, he gave me a birthday shout out on Twitter. So there's all sorts of different platforms. So wherever you did it, I appreciate it. But enough about me. You're not here for me. But also today we've got a big show. I'm talking a bombshell corruption allegation going on. I should say allegations going on in North Charleston. It's huge news as far as how many people are caught up in it. It involves city council. And then also some crazy news about a pricey condominium complex downtown where residents are being told they need to get out by today at 5 p.m. And then we have some updates. So much going on. So we got to get into it first. The bombshell that came out of North Charleston. Huge news. Like I said, 3 city council members are facing federal corruption charges in a influence peddling case that also brought in 8 other people and showed a troubling pattern of bribes, extortion, and kickbacks in the city of North Charleston. So yes, a lot of talk about bribes and payments and all manner of huge allegations of corruption. It's a big story, even if you don't live in North Charleston or, don't really care about these sorts of things. This is big. These 3, 2 have already resigned their position. And 1 was suspended by Henry McMaster, the governor. He is able to get involved in these matters when someone is charged with a crime. So the suspension will last until the completion of, whatever the investigation, the court, I shouldn't say the investigation's done, but the actual, how it plays out in the courts. If they're found not guilty, anyone who's suspended can come back. But it's not looking good because there's a lot of charges involving a lot of different factors. So let's dive into it. First up, City Councilman Jerome Hayward. He is a businessman and a former police officer. He is one of the gentlemen who resigned from office. He did so on Wednesday, which is the day he and others were accused of all these different levels of corruption. So he specifically was accused of using his elected office, being a city councilman, of course, to line his own pockets with tens of thousands of dollars through a series of different events that took place. In addition, council members Mike A. Brown and Sandino Moses also were caught up in this FBI probe in connection with bribery payments. Just as like an editor's note, for lack of a better term, there is another Mike Brown on the North Charleston City Council We're talking about Mike A. Brown, who is District 1 in North Charleston. The other Mike Brown is not involved in this. So I just wanted to, if you start looking up things or you're like, wait, Mike Brown's my representative, it might not be the same person. So just wanted to put that out there. So this federal investigation launched a year ago, so February of 2024. It was launched after the Post and Courier had an article about possible corruption or some things that involving nonprofits that some just didn't pass the smell test, and that's when this investigation was launched. And you, by the way, all of this, there's so many levels and details. Go to the link in the show notes so you can get the whole full rundown. But I'm going to give you a good chunk of it right now. So, yes, the investigation took about a year. We now have 3 city council members from North Charleston facing criminal charges, along with 2 consultants, a pair of nonprofit leaders, and the head of a financial company who is accused of laundering bribe payments. Court documents show that investigators used wiretaps, financial records, and, of course, witnesses to break open the case. Hayward's charging document alleges that he solicited payments from a local business in exchange for official actions as a councilman. He accepted bribes from a person whose company had business before the city and embezzled city funds by arranging kickbacks from nonprofit organizations that received grants from North Charleston. Nonprofit leaders Donovan Moten of Core for Success Foundation and Michelle Stent Hilton of Deep SC were both charged with giving Hayward a 20% cut of their grant money in return for his support in obtaining the funds. So basically, they wanted to get some grant funds. They said, hey, we'll give you 20% of that money if you go to bat for us. And apparently that's exactly what happened. In addition, Stent Hilton also served as Hayward's personal assistant, so just to add to the levels here. She and Moten are accused of laundering those payments through a financial business that's run by Rose Lorenzo, who was also charged in the scheme. The trio faces bribery, conspiracy, wire fraud, and money laundering charges. In addition to that, Hayward is also accused of using his office to shake down an unidentified local businessman for money in return for his support for changes that would benefit the businessman's operation. These are all according to the charging documents. So Hayward at the moment faces around 14 counts in total, with charges ranging from bribery and wire fraud to money laundering. He faces up to 20 years in prison, according to authorities. His bond hearing is scheduled for today in U.S. District Court. So there may be a slight update when you're listening to this podcast. We'll get to the other guys in a moment, but because this also relates to Hayward. So also swept up in this federal investigation is the Charleston County Parks and Recreation Commission and Sea Fox Boats. They had a project that ultimately didn't come to fruition that they were working on, and now some consultants got caught up in this scheme. So Hayward and Brown, Brown being Mike A. Brown, who I mentioned earlier, they are accused of accepting bribes from consultants hired to lobby and ensure that the deal won approval. The consultants, Aaron Hicks and Hasten Torrey Fields, also have been charged in the case with wire fraud and bribery. Charging documents describe Brown growing frustrated in April of 2024 because the boat company had not yet paid Hicks, which was part of the deal, and it was expected to give Brown money to help with his son's wedding expenses. So they were supposed to pay Hicks, or Hicks was supposed to get money from the boat company. Hicks is the consultant. He was then supposed to give that money, or at least some of it, to Brown, and that was part of helping to pay for his son's wedding. And again, they're getting all these details from things like wiretaps and whatnot. So Brown is the council member, or should say former council member, who did not offer his resignation. Hayward did, and Sandino Moses, who I'll talk about in a moment, also, although it was a little bit later, also submitted their resignation. Brown did not, so that's the gentleman that Henry McMaster, the governor, suspended from office until he's either acquitted, convicted, or a successor is elected. So Sandino Moses, he was elected to the city council to represent District 3 back in November of 2023, and he's accused of taking a total of $450 from the consultant Fields, who I mentioned before, but he returned that money after he spoke with Hayward about how to navigate conversations with CFOX and the consultants ahead of the next rezoning vote. So this guy took $450, which seems like nothing in comparison, and then ultimately returned it, but still took the payment. So he's charged for allegedly failing to alert authorities to the attempted bribe to influence his vote. And he signed a plea agreement on February 24th that calls for him to resign, like I mentioned, and continue to cooperate with the investigation. So he's already said, "Yep, you got me. I should have told you about that. I didn't. I'm going to take this plea agreement, and I'm going to help you out, with the other stuff." So just a ton of accusations. Obviously, Hayward had the biggest collection, if you will, of charges, and you think these sort of things happen, but sure, we don't get a lot of these, at least not in this area. You don't get a ton of these types of investigations that tend to lead to anywhere this big. I mean, this is three people that sit on a city council who are affected, and then five others, so a total of eight people, all caught up in this scheme, mostly involving bribes and payoffs and kickbacks and all that. Just wow. And that's going to knock those three guys off of city council. So now those districts don't have a representative that'll be able to go to any meetings or make any decisions or speak on their behalf until someone can fill those roles. And it's unclear when that will happen. Charleston County Board of Voter Registration and Elections, their spokesman, Matt Delane, said if a person is convicted of a felony or an offense against the election laws, they can't hold office unless 15 years have passed since the completion of the sentence. So, if any of them are found guilty in this scheme, they wouldn't be able to run for office again for at least 15 years. But probably be surprising if they did. People likely wouldn't lend their support, but you never know. So when there's updates about when they're going to fill those seats, how it's going to happen, what's going to take place, those details are coming. I'll be sure to pass them on. But for now, like I said, be sure to visit the link in the show notes. There's actually two links. You can get even more details about these crimes and how all these different things came to be. You can learn more about that failed project that I mentioned with the county parks and the Seafox boats. So yeah, just a huge story, massive corruption being exposed. Allegedly, of course, they'll have their day in court and all that, but usually the FBI isn't going to bring charges unless they're feeling pretty good about their chances of getting these folks to either enter a plea or be found guilty in court. So I'll definitely keep you updated on this huge story. I'm sure it'll be going on for a while. Another wild story took place in between the last episode and now, and that is that the city of Charleston is telling residents of the Dockside Condominiums, which is, you probably recognize it. It's a tower downtown near the South Carolina Aquarium. Um, all those residents of that building have to evacuate by 5 p.m. today. So the Dockside Association Board of Representatives, they said that their engineering firm had recommended the evacuation of the building. Apparently, this building has faced structural issues as recently as 2023. So it appears that this is what it's related to, because they keep talking in their press releases, whether it's the city or the Dockside Association Board, all talking about safety of the residents is priority. Safety of the residents is number one. So it seems that this is related to structural issues. So clearly they are worried and made a decision quickly. I feel so bad for these folks who live there. They got to just pick up their entire lives and get out basically within 2 days, because this was the announcement was made on Wednesday. So these poor folks, are going to have to find somewhere to live, find places to store their items. Like, they just have to uproot everything and get out. And these are not cheap condominiums. They're right by the water, like I said, by the South Carolina Aquarium. I was looking up what prices have been, and obviously things change and they range year to year when it comes to condominiums and how much they're being sold for and things. But they're not cheap, no matter how you look at it. They are not cheap at all, and it'll be interesting to see what happens from here. I'm sure there's going to be lawsuits or something, people needing compensation. It's going to be, a long story as well. But most importantly, is the safety, as they all said. So hopefully everybody gets out. Everybody's, gets all their stuff out of there by Friday at 5. Hopefully, they'll be able to bounce back, whatever that means in this situation. But the biggest news is that they are safe, and that the city, obviously being alerted by the actual condominium complex that there was this issue, you know, they made the right call in ensuring that, if there is a structural issue that could really cause a problem, we got to get these people out. So a tough call, not one that I would want to have to make, but if there's any doubt that a place is safe for residents, you got to get them out of there. So, a horrible story, feel bad for the residents, but glad that they're getting people out of there safely before something tragic were to happen. All right, we have a update now on that tragic death of a K-9 officer. You may remember this happened back in last year in Dorchester County, where a dog was left in a police vehicle and ultimately died. There was an investigation. It was done by SLED. Anytime there's an investigation into a police officer, especially if they're on duty during an incident, it goes to the South Carolina State Law Enforcement, or SLED, and they look into it. And so we've got a little bit more information thanks to local media requesting some paperwork through the Freedom of Information Act, also called FOIA. So we have a little bit more details about what exactly occurred. So, through the FOIA request, we are finding out more details about what happened back on July 28th, 2024. As I mentioned, that's the date that K-9 officer died after being left unattended in a patrol vehicle by its handler. Investigators determined that the dog died from heat stroke. They ruled out other possibilities, although they did conclude the K-9 had heart congestion and some other conditions that might have factored into this, maybe making them more likely to have a stroke. But ultimately, that was the ruling. So then SLED announced in January that they did not find any criminal charges against the handler whose name is Brandon Edwards. The report said that Deputy Edwards was ultimately demoted, received a reduction in pay, and was transferred off the Dorchester County Sheriff's Office K-9 unit because of the incident. So what happened that day? So on the day of the incident, around 2:30 to 3 p.m., the report says that Deputy Edwards was met at his residence by another deputy to switch vehicles. Edwards' assigned K-9 patrol vehicle had been out of service, and he was given a spare, unmarked vehicle to drive in the meantime. He and another deputy had been sharing a marked patrol car and would meet to exchange their vehicles before their shifts. So the dog was inside a kennel inside Edwards' garage. And then Edwards then placed the K-9 inside a Tahoe, which was turned on and running, and Edwards said was, quote, cool, unquote, temperature-wise, obviously, when the dog was put in there. While switching out the equipment, Edwards and the other deputy started to inspect one of the tires on the vehicles as it appeared to be flat. And I know this sounds made up, but this is what the report says. As they were doing that, an errant golf ball shattered the window of the vehicle. And why is that? Well, the residence is actually near a golf course. So it's not completely out of, it just seems weird when I'm reading that. I'm like, wait, they're inspecting a flat tire and then a golf ball comes in? Yes, shatters the windshield. So the other deputy ultimately leaves the residence. Edwards repositioned the vehicle in the driveway and shut the engine off. The report states that the K-9 was still inside the vehicle at that time. Around 5 p.m., Edwards reportedly left his residence and forgot that the dog was still in the vehicle, since he normally would be in the kennel in the garage, which is where he was when this all started. It wasn't until about 9 p.m., so about 4 hours later, after he had left his residence, that he came back and discovered that he had left the dog in the vehicle and went to check on him. Edwards said he was under considerable stress that afternoon with having to switch patrol vehicles, plus then the shattered windshield and the potential flat tire. And he was kind of saying, basically that was his way of saying why he probably forgot all about the dog. Now, I didn't know this, but K-9 vehicles are actually equipped with what's known as a hot pop, which monitors temperature in the vehicle. Once the temperature exceeds 84 degrees, it would lower the vehicle's windows and sound an alarm. However, since Edwards' vehicle was turned off, the hot pop was inactive. This is all according to the report, of course. So if he had left it running for whatever reason and the vehicle got that hot, windows would have rolled down. There would have been an alarm to alert him, but that was not the case. So those are the details that police and SLED were not releasing, but thanks to that FOIA request, we now have a little bit more information about what exactly occurred that day. Certainly a tragedy. So sad that this had to happen. But yeah, there were a lot of questions when it was found that there was no criminal, charges coming to the officer. And I think this helps clear up the situation, what exactly occurred. And you can decide should there have been some kind of criminal element to this or not. But those are the details according to the report. If anything changes, I'm not expecting it to, as far as them changing their mind on charges or anything. But if there is any update, I'll be sure to pass it along. And finally, yes, it happened again. We saw this happen with the North Charleston Police Department, and we saw this happen with the Goose Creek Police Department. But now you can add the Somerville Police Department to the list of this very disappointing trend that we're seeing. Somerville Police Chief Douglas Wright issued a strong statement this week condemning racist and hateful comments that were left on the department's social media posts that were celebrating Black History Month. The department, just like the other two I mentioned, had been highlighting Black police officers and employees in a Facebook post as part of its recognition of Black History Month. However, some users responded with offensive remarks, including some that were just blatantly racist, which prompted Wright to address the situation directly. He said, quote, "The Somerville Police Department is committed to humanizing the badge and breaking down barriers by recognizing our police officers, telecommunicators, and civilian personnel as peacekeepers who keep our community safe. We will not pander to ignorant racist comments toward my police officers or employees," end quote. Applaud the statement, just like, we saw a similar statement from the Goose Creek Police Office. But, just sad that this is the third, at least that we know about them. There's likely more in this state and certainly nationwide, but this is the third just in the Charleston area where police departments were just doing what they normally do during Black History Month. And that's whether it's sharing specific posts about employees or just a general, it's Black History Month, we celebrate, everyone in our department, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, this is the third time that they've been met with these just horrible and racist, bigoted comments. And it's just so sad that this, and again, I know social media is horrible. This sort of stuff's been going on for years. As long as there's been an internet, there's been people being racist on it. But we've seen many these social media companies, specifically Facebook/Instagram, which is owned by Meta, and Twitter, which is owned by Elon Musk, have kind of rolled back some of their guidelines and rules about what is and is not allowed in terms of speech on their platforms. So unfortunately, we've seen an uptick in this sort of thing, and we'll likely continue to see it, because I can't tell you how many times on Twitter over the last couple months I've reported like just blatantly racist comments to some posts of mine, and I get an email saying, "Oh, we didn't find any violations of our community standards," or whatever. Just like, and this isn't like, well, maybe they didn't understand it because they kind of like veiled the comment, or there's a couple levels to it. No, these are just blatant, like anyone would look at it and go, "Oh God, that's racist. Yeah, that's horrible." And nothing happens. Or I've had a couple that said, "We've actioned the comment, appropriately," which just meant that it wasn't deleted. The person didn't have to delete it, but it, there might be a note on it, on the tweet, that says like, "This may go against our community standards against hate," or whatever. So it's still very much there, still easily seen by everybody. And like I said, if that's going to be the case, these sorts of things are going to keep happening. And it's really, really sad and disappointing. All right, that'll do it for this big edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you have an amazing weekend ahead. If you need plans, go to holycitycenter.com/calendar. That's a great way to find out what's going on in town, not just this weekend, but beyond. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And a big thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. Like I said, have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. Have fun. I'll be back with you next week. I'm already looking forward to it. But until then, good night and good luck.